It has been a tumultuous week politically, and I think fair to say on markets as well, both here and in the U.S., given, Davos and Donald Trump's speech, and then, of course, Mark Carney's speech as well. Amanda Lang is standing by to try to explain what all this means and what it's meant for business, because it looks like the news out of Canada, at least today, is good. Amanda Lang is CTV News Chief Financial Correspondent. Amanda, thanks so much for coming on today. And can I begin with what I think is maybe the story that doesn't get talked a lot about? And that's the fact that silver has just gone through $100 an ounce, which is remarkable when you consider not long ago it was $75 an ounce. And of course, gold, we all know what's been happening there. Is this, do you think, a direct result of all this uncertainty in the market, in the world right now?
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. Definitely for the price of gold, which is seen as a kind of a hedge against global risk. We've seen it now pressing up against $5,000 an ounce, which is extraordinary. Silver can go along for that ride a little bit. It's a byproduct of gold, so you do often see it moving in tandem, and it will, along with some like copper, will also move based on kind of the risk scenario in the world, but also the outlook. So, there's some fundamental reasons for silver and copper to move. Gold really is an emotional one, and you've seen a lot of trading in that one that's related to just worries about what's happening, especially with the U.S.
Well, then let me ask that, because, we keep hearing about Canada, critical minerals. It would seem to me if these sort of minerals, these sort of, items are going up every day, this is good news for Canada, for mining companies here as well. Is that accurate?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It's good for our mining companies. It's also good for our markets, which are very heavily weighted towards the resources. I would note, actually, that crude oil also had a pretty good day today, so also a bit of good news back above $60 a barrel for West Texas. So all of that, definitely good. Our markets are very tilted to resources. So although it was a rough week for the broad U.S. market because of the turmoil, it actually maybe benefited us a little bit on that side of the ledger.
So I know there's new StatsCan numbers out today showing retail sales actually up in Canada. We take that obviously as a positive as well.
Yeah, this is a number for November. It was better than expected, but it's not a great number, 1.3%. And there's a flash, a quick look at what happened in December that's showing a decline of 0.5%. So if you take it all together, it kind of adds up to a bit of an anemic consumer. The Canadian consumer really did hold up through parts of this past year, which was really good news because, of course, we had lots of trouble on the trade side. Our exports were weaker. It was offset by some domestic strength, and this data sort of suggests the consumer is starting to get a little bit worried. We've seen that show up also. People are saving their money rather than spending it, which can sound like a good thing, but, of course, can be bad for the economy.
Then, of course, there's the inflation rate. We had the number come out, I guess, for December at 2.4. But and I think the interesting part here is, and I don't know how much this got talked about, some of that, maybe a considerable amount of it, had to do with the fact that the government gave everyone a GST break. So maybe that's not as bad as we think.
Yeah, this, of course, has to do with the year-ago effect, so the base effect, which is these numbers were much lower when you strip out the GST in certain categories, so it looks higher than it would be. The real number that jumped out at me was the grocery number. The inflation at grocery stores is still 5%, still way too much for most Canadians, and, of course, that's building on top of what we've seen in the past. We haven't seen prices come down, and these are fresh issues, unfortunately, especially with things like coffee and beef, some other categories as well of on fruits and vegetables that are just being driven by supply chain issues that are sort of beyond people's control, and that hurts people badly. So when you think about, what can the government do on affordability, that GST break probably did help a lot. It sort of fiddled with these numbers, but it's worth remembering that was actually money in people's pockets last year.
I'd ask you as well, if you could, I realize it's more of a political question, but given, what the week was like, given Mark Carney in Davos and Donald Trump's reaction, what did you make of that overall? And how did business react to that, do you think, generally?
I mean, I think the first what we saw was business as well as sort of the geopolitical reaction, so other world leaders. It was positive. It sounded like we were being led by a prime minister who has a vision and a view, and there's some clarity around it. There's a little bit of a show me that's now kind of surfacing, where now people say, okay, if the old world order is dead, which was Mark Carney's message at Davos, the question is, well, what's the new order, and what does that lead us to? What sort of policy framework are we going to work with? That's still kind of TBD. So for business, it's in some ways more uncertainty, but businesses want to be led with conviction. And so there was I think there was a sense of relief that the quiet part's being said out loud. We're not going to rely on America anymore. We're going to make different plans. We're going to be tactical. And I think probably all of that builds in confidence where there's been some lacking.
Yeah, and again, on the Chinese EV front, of course, the big announcement that we had previous to all this was, the deal with bringing Chinese EVs into Canada. We've seen the reaction, of course, from Doug Ford in Ontario. Mm-hmm. And not ignoring the fact that, of course, if you go a little further west, there's some provinces very happy with this deal because farmers in Canada are going to see more money in their pockets. What do you think of the auto deal, number one? And do you think this hurts the Canadian auto industry? Because I've heard both sides on this.
Yeah, and I think both sides are valid. What I would say is the Prime Minister went to China to get a deal. That was a negotiating tactic, and I think for the pain and suffering of what is a massive industry in our country, and that's our ag exports, it's worth a little haircut somewhere else. So I think probably opening the door to that made sense. We have yet to see how that really plays out with the U.S. Their reaction so far has been pretty tame. That was my big concern, is it would throw a real wrench into any negotiations we have with them. But the reality is, after that deal, Mark Carney went to Davos and said the old order is dead. If you're in the traditional auto manufacturing sector in Canada, you better pay attention to what's going to happen because things may look different down the road. So there's a kind of a reality in front of us. The premiers will fight it out because they will guard their own territory and their own jobs as they should. But there's a reason why we're, a federation of provinces, and in the end, the Prime Minister has to take a national view. It's why we have equalization, right? If one province has to suffer to the benefit of another, we sort it out after the fact, and we make sure that Canadians can be treated the same way in every province.
I would, just to follow up on that, it caught me by surprise. I heard the Prime Minister making the announcement, read the Chinese EVs, and then I caught a part at the end where he said there's an expectation in this deal that beyond just buying or allowing Chinese cars to come in and dropping the tariff rate on those cars, that they may somehow, open plants, open some kind of facilities here. That is part of the issue, I guess, for Ontario, right? Saying that all we're doing is taking in these cars and basically, opening up our businesses to them. Have you heard anything in the deal that Canada did work out that shows that the Chinese would be investing here beyond just sending these cars here?
Nothing concrete, but definitely an inference that there will be, that any future kind of opening up would involve supply chain integration, would involve assembly, all of the things that we would want. That just makes sense, and that's the kind of thing that you put on the table in every category, right? If we're going to talk about fighter jets from Europe, we're going to talk about assembling them and using technology and contributing to the service side of them here. So yes, I would think if we open up the door to more Chinese manufactured vehicles, we come to some kind of, is it Autopack 3.0? Who knows? But some kind of new arrangement with them, just like we do with all the international automakers, right? Honda also assembles here. So does Toyota. So those are the kinds of things we do ask people to do. We don't want them to ship finished cars here particularly.
Yeah, by the way, I read today that one of those Chinese companies called Chery, I guess, has already got an ad today looking to hire people in Ontario, in Toronto, so they can open up sales offices and everything else. So if you're looking for a job and you want to go to Toronto, you could find a job selling Chinese EVs as of today, which I thought was kind of interesting.
That is interesting. They're quick off the mark. And I've already heard from people. People will feel differently about this, Aaron, but I know personally people who are excited to buy a cheaper EV car. They sound good. They're not worried about the fact that they're Chinese. To quote one friend of mine, I'm not that interesting. Let them be listening to me. So this is going to play out. It's a long game, and that's a big economy that we want access to. So, but we do have to work some things out internally to make sure our own existing jobs don't suffer. That's the line we walk.
I love that line. I'm not that interesting. I don't mind if they're listening to me. That's fine. That's a great line. The last thing I did want to ask, with respect to CUSMA, I don't know if you heard Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, go off on Mark Carney and what he said the other day, and kind of imply, it seemed almost like a threat to me, like, you do this deal, CUSMA's coming up, and I'm not so sure we're going to be ready to give you what you want. Is this something we should be worrying about? And I know it keeps being brought up because, we've gone ahead and decided to do business with a country they would prefer for us not to have done business with.
Yeah, I mean, it's a factor, and I think it's a factor that was in place, and the Prime Minister is well aware of it. We know what we're dealing with. They are not a reliable trading partner right now, and so we need to have a plan B. We need to have other irons in the fire, and I think that's just logical. And it's one thing for Howard Lutnick to say, something in an interview from Davos. It's another thing for what's being said behind closed doors in negotiation, and that's where, the deal may not look the same on the other side of this, but there's plenty of pressure coming from U.S. businesses and state governors to keep components of this deal in place. So, how it ends up is anybody's guess at this point, but the negotiations are very different than what gets said in an interview, that's for sure.
We'll leave it at that. Amanda, thanks so much. Always appreciate your time.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app.